In today's episode, I'm excited to introduce Dr. Tony Wigglesworth, who's a leader in education innovation with a rich background in business transformation and clean tech. He drives innovation for Bow Valley College here in Calgary, Alberta. And today he will be talking to you about educational innovation in the future of technology. I'll see you in the next wave. Let's explore AI and future technology. At the Infinite Waves podcast, we are dedicated to spotlighting leaders who blend creativity with technology to shape the future. Powered by Creative Innovations Lab, this podcast delves into innovation, paving the way to a sustainable, smarter world. Tune in and let's pioneer the next wave of possibilities together. Up next, I have an amazing guest here today with me to talk about how innovation in the education sector can shape the future of business. Welcome to the show, Tony. How are you?
Oh, very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show, Russell. I appreciate it.
Amazing. So before we get into the questions, Tony, I'd like to introduce you as Tony to my audience. I'd like to pick a little bit about your background, your experiences, and what shaped Tony Wigglesworth to be the person here today.
Well, thank you. That's a great question. So I grew up in a small town in British Columbia. I'm from the Okanagan Valley. Grew up in Penticton. A beautiful place to live. I think my childhood there was really amazing. Spending a lot of time with family on the lakes and in the orchard. And I think during that time really shaped my love for the outdoors. Is something that I've sort of done throughout my life. Enjoying, hiking, mountain biking, and snowboarding. Just great time, just enjoying the outdoors, connecting with family, and always gives me that little bit of a reset. And so that's a little bit about my personal background. In terms of my education, I studied at Okanagan College, so really wanted to stay close to home at a smaller community college. Started out my career really not knowing what I wanted to do. Started studying a general science program at that time. Sort of fell in love with math, economics, and chemistry, which is kind of an odd combination.
Wow.
And I think I had one professor, Dr. Ed Neeland. He was a fantastic professor in organic chemistry, and I think he really shaped my love for science. And I ended up pursuing my degree in chemistry at Okanagan College. Had a chance to join their co-op program, got to work in some really interesting places. I worked at a gold mine, I worked in different labs in the fiberglass industry, as well as getting to do some research in chemistry at the college, supporting the wine industry. And I think at that time that really shaped my love for, innovation and research. From then I went and joined my graduate studies at Simon Fraser University, working with Dr. Neil Branda, developing molecular switches for looking at different applications, mainly in, I would say, electronics. So how do you change the properties of materials using light? And then you could change things like the shape of the material, the color, the refractive index, and then look at different applications in material science. At that time, I really wanted to pursue a career as a research scientist at a university, maybe be a research professor. And so I decided to do a postdoc. So I talked to my wife and we decided to move to Switzerland. So I did my postdoc in Zurich, Switzerland at the ETH Zurich with Dr. Francois Diedrich. Wanted to still stay in material science, but shift my focus more into biological sciences just to broaden a little bit of my breadth of my research. And at that time, had a really fun time working in Switzerland. Really got to do some cool research, did a lot of traveling, got to explore the Alps and kind of all over Europe. So that was a really fantastic opportunity. And I would say one of the biggest challenges with moving abroad was really trying to get back into the workforce in Canada, come back because my wife's family's here. My family's here in Southern Alberta. So we're thinking, well, how do we get back to Canada? So I tried getting into different universities as a professor and just sort of thought that maybe, this is not for me and I should really try an industry track. And so was at a conference, connected with someone from my previous research group that was leaving his role with Xerox Canada at that time. And so I thought, well, you know what, this sounds like a really cool opportunity, great opportunity to come back, live in Canada, still work in research, doing material science. And so I ended up accepting a position at Xerox with Xerox Innovation Group at the Xerox Research Center of Canada in Mississauga. So my family moved there with my family. So that was a really interesting time to move back from Europe. I remember arriving at the airport with a luggage cart, full of everything we owned, with my 2 children on top of it. I'm just ready to kind of resettle and launch my career with Xerox. So that was a really, I think, fantastic opportunity. And that's really, I think, where I cut my teeth in research and innovation. So not doing research for research's sake, but doing research to solve real world business problems. It's kind of where I learned that when you're innovating and working for a company, your research can't just be fun. It has to create business value for your employer, for your customer. So I think that really really set my career off on a really strong footing. I used that sort of experience to do kind of bit of a career pivot. We wanted to move back out west. I do still, always loved the mountains and wanted to move back to Alberta because our family's here. So I ended up accepting a position with Innovate Calgary as a senior technology licensing manager, and sort of worked my way up through the ranks there. Ended up running their technology transfer office, and I think at this time I really fell in love with clean tech. I think, as you know, the climate's changing, and there's a lot of big challenges with that sector. And I think, clean tech can have a really positive impact on the oil and gas industry, help them, produce really clean oil here in Alberta, and help the industry grow. So I think that's super exciting, as well as create a lot of jobs for new companies and lots of commercialization opportunities. I think in that role, I was able to work with some really amazing faculty at the university and help them start companies or license their research into to other companies. So that was a really cool experience. And so I spent about 7 years there. Ended up getting contacted by a recruiter just after the pandemic. I thought, well, you know what? I love innovation. I love working with startups. And why don't I move into the kind of college sector, be able to apply those skills and really help develop the next generation of talent that's going to help to shape the tech industry here in Calgary. So took on that opportunity in November 2021. I've been with the college now almost 4 years. Had a really fantastic time. Got to work with some really amazing people, and now really helping the industry to grow really through the lens of talent development. So that's kind of sort of shaped my career, and that's how I got where I am today.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I notice your career has spanned across several industries. And I picked something that you mentioned, sustainable energy or clean tech. And I know sustainability is heart of every industry, and especially clean tech. How do you see the changes and emerging technology kind of shaping that industry, or how do you see this industry shaping into with the change in technologies?
I think overall it's going to be positive. So, I really believe in materials-driven innovations for the clean tech industry. So, there's long-standing technologies for carbon capture. So liquid amine technologies, they can scrub CO2 out of flue gas, for example. If you're doing steam, steam-assisted gravity generation, then you're producing a lot of steam, you're burning a lot of fossil fuels. But if you can capture that CO2, then you can produce that energy much cleaner and much more sustainably. But the challenge with that technology is that you pay a fairly large energy penalty to re-release the CO2. So if you can design better materials that can absorb carbon, but then release it with much less energy penalty, you can make that process much more efficient. I think there's been a lot of fantastic research at University of Calgary around metal organic framework technologies coming out of the research group of Dr. George Shimizu. And so he makes some really interesting materials that can, scrub CO2 out of the air very efficiently, but then also release it really easy. So then you can basically liquefy it and pump it underground for long-term storage. So I think there's going to be huge impacts in that area through the design of better materials. And this is where I think technologies like AI can really come in and accelerate innovation within the space. I found AI to be an incredibly efficient way to innovate, and if you have the right data and the right models, I think you can design much better materials and really accelerate the pace of innovation. So one of the things I learned in Xerox was that it typically takes around 15 years to commercialize a new material, and it might cost $50 to $100 million to do that. So that takes significant investment. But now I think, with you can accelerate innovation in terms of discovering new materials, but then also innovating with AI to also improve the processes to make that materials at commercial scale. So I think that's where we I'm hoping that we'll see a lot of positive impacts around technology. And then I think the second piece to that equation is then what do we do with all the CO2 afterwards?
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of cool research happening around converting those materials into more useful building blocks. So taking a waste material like CO2 and then creating value-added products, for example, for the chemical industry. And so through research that I did with various groups at U of C, so I worked a lot with Dr. Avail LaBurse. So her group, they're experts in electrochemistry. So they basically can take CO2 molecule at high temperature and electrolyze that into different building blocks like carbon monoxide and oxygen, which is those are widely used precursors that you can use in other chemical processes. And so I was able to work with a lot of really supporting some really cool research and helping companies get started. And then I think seeing those companies advance, seeing those researchers, go from a research track into a business track and moving into more of a CEO type role or CTO role with their own startup company, I think is incredibly impactful. And yeah, an exciting space to be in here in Calgary.
Yeah, like you mentioned something that's very interesting. You mentioned like you help them innovate, do the research, but also groom themselves into leaders. Like, and also going back into what you mentioned before, like innovation, it's not just a skill. Innovation is more of a mindset. Like, it's not easy. Not everybody can do innovation, and it's an ongoing process. And you're able to help businesses right now. You're helping businesses to achieve that. I just like to know, for someone to learn innovation or maybe fall in love with innovation, you probably need a coach or a mentor or some sort of a leadership influence on yourself. Growing up or in your career, did you have any sort of influence or mentor that kind of shaped your mindset into innovation?
Yeah, I think I've had a lot of fantastic mentors over the years. I'd like to kind of highlight a couple here. So one was Dr. Ken Porter. So Ken hired me into my role with Innovate Calgary, kind of took a chance on me coming from industry, going back into academia. That was a little bit of a different role for me. But I think he was a really fantastic mentor. And so I got to work for him for about 4 years. Really helped to advance my career before he ended up moving on to a different role. So I think that's someone I definitely like to highlight. I think a great mentor, they need not just to support you, but they have to challenge your thinking and kind of push you to do better and give you that kind of little pieces of insight and kind of observe those things in yourself that you wouldn't maybe acknowledge or notice. And so I think part of being a good mentor is being willing to give that feedback. And I think that's critically important. And then I think the other thing is, like in my role now, our VP academic, Dr. Shriel Kinzel, she's a fantastic mentor. Super supportive. Again, someone that I can bounce ideas off, that we can innovate on. But she's always asking those questions to dig a little bit deeper, and help to kind of reframe the ideas and make sure they're really aligned with the vision and mission of the college, which is really again around talent development. How do we help support learners, eventually get into the workforce, because that's where they're coming to college, and giving them those hands-on practical skills that the industry needs in order to grow. So there are just a couple of examples of great mentors I've had in my career.
Amazing. And you mentioned that this all starts in college or with the education system. With the rapid evolution in technology right now with AI and everything that's going on around it, how do you see the education sector innovating and changing to keep up with this rapid pace?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really at a very interesting dynamic in the world right now with AI innovations accelerating almost daily. Education was definitely one of the sectors that I think was impacted first. I remember when ChatGPT first came online and I sort of became fascinated with the technology. You can now have like a conversation with a computer. You can innovate and really use that to create new ideas for new products or new programs. So I think it's a really fantastic tool. But then on the other side of it, we also know students are using it, and then we're concerned we want students to learn the skills and knowledge they need to be successful in the workplace. So then you have that academic integrity kind of question that comes into play, where we want students to use the AI to do work better and faster and more efficiently. Then we also need to learn them, teach them how to code, how to set up a computer network, how to write a business plan. And so how do you teach students to learn in the age of AI? I think that's really quite a fascinating area. because I don't think you can discourage students to use it because it's a real world tool that they're going to use every day in their careers, and that's definitely impacting the world. But I think if you accept that reality and say, well, how do I have to do things differently and change my practice to really teach students, and going look at more, I'd say more skills-based training. What can you use AI to do? But also recognizing that you have to learn how to code, and then really looking at also how we assess students. So maybe the best way to assess students isn't having them write an essay anymore. Maybe it's writing an essay and then use ChatGPT to write an essay on this topic and then give a critical critique of that essay. So I think it's also about challenging the way we assess students. And then also, I think teaching students about some of the subtleties of AI. So how do you use the technology safely? If you're using AI to generate an image, so I think you have to think about, well, then, is that a potential copyright infringement, right? I think that risk is always going to lie on the end user of the technology. And the disclaimer is that if you use Midjourney and you violate someone's copyright, that actually falls on you as the end user. So being able to use those things in a way that's, I think, ethical is really important. And then to come back to the sustainability piece, I think you also have to realize that AI takes a lot of energy and it uses a lot of water. So understanding that, just being totally reliant on AI is not really a good thing either. It's knowing when to use it and being able to use it, I think, to add value. And I think that's just an incredibly tricky space to be in. And that's just on the education side, right? And then, like any company, we're a business, we want to do things more efficiently. I think it's no secret the post-secondary sector has had some challenges in recent years with changes to international enrollments, declining government funding. So we have to look at ways to do things better and more efficiently and to a higher quality. And I think one of the ways you can do that is with the assistance of artificial intelligence, but then you also have to make sure that you have the right business processes in place, that your staff are well educated and trained on using those tools and they see the benefit of it and not the threat. And so I think it's also about creating that culture of innovation and creating that curiosity to get people interested in using the tools. And a lot of that is just through experimentation. Sometimes things you think, AI can help me, you're going to spend an extra hour that maybe you didn't, isn't really adding a lot of value. So a lot of that is through, I think, curiosity, through innovation, and just being curious about what the tools can do. And then I think really the hardest part is that organizational culture about getting people curious about adapting to technology and not being afraid that it's going to take their job, but it's going to provide them an opportunity to really focus on the things where humans can really add value. It's about those face-to-face conversations with students. It's about, really focusing on that value add rather than, okay, here's a little bit of a routine task that I could do more efficiently or easier with AI, and then just being able to identify those opportunities and then being able to create those solutions to solve those business problems within the sector.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you for some advice with my next question. You mentioned something, a whole different angle from an educational perspective for new students who are trying to get into the technology space and innovation space and eventually business space, starting their own startups or getting employed in innovative organizations. What would be one piece of advice that you'd like to give to those students who are paving their path, trying to build their careers, trying to learn to prepare themselves for what's out there? What kind of a mindset or what kind of advice can you give them?
Yeah, I think it's be curious. I think that's number one. Discover what your passion is and be curious. I think that goes a long way. I was very fortunate in my career to discover that early on. And I think what's really helped me sustain my career is really that curiosity. And so just being curious about new technology, thinking about, well, how can I use this to positively impact what I do for my employer? And really always be thinking about how can I add business value using these different tools or technologies. I think that's really, really critical. And then also understanding that you have to, I think when you're communicating a new innovation or solution to your employer, then you have to really leverage that kind of business mindset. So think about what problem you're trying to solve, really hone in on the problem, and don't get too focused on that solution. So hone in on the problem, be curious about different solutions, and be able to really pitch that idea back to your employer to gain that traction you'll need to really move an idea forward.
Okay.
And I'd like to understand from your perspective. Right now, AI and technology is pushing a lot of businesses to automate and things to be done in much fast pace. Right now, with AI and everything that's going on, with robotics coming much more faster to industries that we never thought that would get adopted by robotics, is now changing really fast. Where do you see the changes between blue collar and white collar industries being impacted with this new AI coming into their industries?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Something I'm spending a lot of time thinking about because we're in the talent development business at Bow Valley College, and we want to train people for demand job roles. We don't want to train them for job roles where there's less employment opportunities. I don't think that's fair to students because at the end of the day, they're making that investment so they can get their dream job or their dream career.
Yeah.
So I think that's really critical. Is really thinking about the impacts on the sector and then prioritizing your work. So I think of a little 4-quadrant grid, and so up in the top upper right-hand side, you have fields that are high human touch, but also high AI touch. So those would be the AI augmented roles. I think those are really critical roles to really be effectively training students on how AI tools work, on ethics, and how they can add business value in various sectors. So then having really tailored courses around the use of AI in different sectors. On the left-hand, the upper left-hand corner, you'd have roles that are more human-centered, but also can be impacted by AI. And I think of those roles in like healthcare. So think about AI for nursing. Right now, AI is impacting healthcare. I was just at the Upper Bound conference in Edmonton a couple of weeks ago, and there's a lot of innovations in health tech. So medical imaging, you're seeing now a lot of medical offices using dictation software really to take some of the busy work away from doctors to make sure that they can really spend more time with patients, less time doing paperwork. And so there's a lot of interesting opportunities within the healthcare sector. And I think those are also very, very important job roles to train for. Mm-hmm. And then in the bottom left, you can have those sort of stable routine roles. And so that'd be like your security guards, maybe you're a taxi driver or you're in a custodial staff. And then I would say like the blue collar work is kind of in between, right? It's not as heavily impacted by AI today. There's lots of opportunities in the trades, skilled trades. We see there's skill shortages across many sectors. So. Carpenters, electricians, plumbers, HVAC, like those are roles that are not going away anytime soon, and they're not as heavily impacted by AI today. But where I do see value is a lot of those workers are also businessmen. They own their own business. Maybe they're running a renovation company, or you're focusing on EV installs. So now there's all this additional busy paperwork that you have to do. You're doing customer invoices. You have to advertise your business, create a social media presence. And these are, I think, incredible opportunities where AI can really help people grow their businesses and do more with less. So I think there's huge opportunities there, teaching AI skills to tradespeople, but more on the business side. And then, of course, it's always nice to have a little question and answer machine in your pocket. If you don't know the answer, then there's a tool that you can have, how do I wire this? Or how do I find information on this particular building code? And then so you have that there to assist you and do your work better. But then I think about, well, what's the future going to look like? Because, I have 2 kids. My son, Ben, he's studying business at MRU. So I have this conversation with him all the time. I said, well, think about how AI is going to impact your sector. And then, if you want to get employment in the sector, I also think you know how to use those tools to be more efficient at what you do. He loves finance. That's where he wants to go into. And so I'd always encourage him to be curious about the tools, just think about doing your work in a little bit of a different way. And then my daughter, she wants to go into healthcare. So she's thinking about being a nurse. And so that's like, well, then how do you use AI to learn new things, learn biology? Again, like not using it to copy your answers, but using it to help tutor you. Or think about, when you're going out into the workforce, if you're a nurse, working with patients every day, what are those little problems you might have in your day where AI can help you be more efficient so you can really focus on patient care? And so I think, again, it's just about alignment with those particular sectors. And then, of course, you have the robotics discussion, right? Yeah. So thinking towards the future, huge advancements in AI, and what people really aren't talking about is robotics as much, right? So you have companies with incredibly advanced technologies. I think, Boston Dynamics has humanoid robots. And there's robotics used heavily in manufacturing, so the automotive sector. If we want to grow those sectors here in North America and in Canada, we're going to have to embrace automation to bring down the cost, because from our labor cost perspective, we can't compete with other manufacturing jurisdictions, right? So we have to embrace an innovation mindset, and again, use robotics to, I think, target those big sectors that are kind of ripe for some disruption. So I think that's an incredibly interesting area where how do we use, I think, robotics and automation within the building industry I also think is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
We all know we have a housing shortage. So how do you use those technologies to just build things differently? And so I think that's kind of an area I'm quite curious about.
Very interesting.
And then I do believe that one day, in the not too distant future, I don't know if it's 10 years, I don't know if it's 20 years, but we will be, in certain sectors, people will be working with robots in ways they couldn't imagine today. So like humanoid robots are getting more and more advanced. Yes, they're not good at fine motor skills yet, but I think we will see an explosion of robotics also in the trades. It's just still a few years into the future, and nobody really has a crystal ball. But I think it's really interesting to think about that future. And then also from an education perspective, this is a world that I think all the post-secondaries need to work together and really train people for this new world and train people for the future of work.
Absolutely. Wow, that's amazing advice. And we are coming towards the latter part of our conversation. And I have this one question which I usually ask all my guests that come here. If you have a magic wand, and if you want technology and AI to solve any problem for you or a challenge, what would that be for you?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. I'm spending a lot of time thinking about it. So like any sector, like the education sector, we have our challenges, right? We're being, with budget cuts, we're being, pressed to do more with less. So I think that's, if I had a magic wand without AI, I would wish the government would, provide a stable business environment so we can continue to attract quality international students and continue to attract high quality domestic students into our programs and provide that, I think, the high level quality education that our industry needs to grow. So that would be my one wish. On the AI side though, I think there's huge opportunities, I think within, I would say around a couple really areas that I think I'd like to highlight. I think one is really around just like how we advise students, how we coach students on their different career paths. So making that, I think, information more accessible through the use of AI tools, helping students to create their own customized plan, and then spend more time working with the advisors on, helping them answer those more detailed questions rather than what prereqs do I need to get into a nursing program, or I'm really interested in, technology, but I didn't do so good in this math high school course. Being able to have AI that really supports that student journey, I think would be really critical. And I do think there's also opportunities for AI in the admissions processes. So helping organizations streamline their admissions processes to make that a lot more efficient.
All right, Tony. So thank you very much for sharing. That was some great information and great insights into looking into the future for many industries in clean tech or education or business in general. I mean, this was a very wonderful conversation, and thank you very much for being here. And before we go, I'd like to let my audience know where they could connect with you and find you. Tony, would you like to share your information to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much, Russell, for having me on the show. It was a great conversation today. Really enjoyed being on the show. You can find me on LinkedIn at Tony Wigglesworth, and also at bowvalleycollege.ca.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Tony. And up next, we have Vis Naidu from SAIT talking about how technology is shaping education and preparing students for the future of business. And we'll see you with that one on the next wave.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Infinite Waves. We hope you're inspired to pioneer your own innovations. Brought to you by Creative Innovations Lab, where creativity and technology drives the future. See you on the next wave.